Thank you all for coming, and let's get started. We have a very full agenda, and I want to thank the mayoral candidates who elected to come here and be with us this afternoon. We invited all the candidates. These are the 4 who accepted the invitation. And the topic today is one that we've run into. We are the Coalition for a Safer Albuquerque. We've been working over the last several years on a variety of issues dealing with behavioral health, homelessness, drug addiction, trying to advocate for changes that are both humane but effective. And we've had some limited success. One of the things that we always make a point of doing is reaching out to the ones being served by these programs to get their views on things. How are they working? And you're going to hear their stories this afternoon. So the coalition is very eager to have anybody who wants to join participate with us. You can ask any of the people that are part of the coalition here today how you can get involved with us. I want to thank particularly the people who've agreed to serve this afternoon, and I want to start with asking Serene Ubis to come up and to give us an invocation.
Good afternoon, I'm Serene Abyss. I've never done this before, but thank you for your grace. I'm here to call us, mind, body, and soul, to honor the First Nations of these lands, displaced and dispossessed by indifference and abuse, but who continue to resist and reclaim. I also call us to feel the tragedies and the triumphs of the stories that you're going to hear, to remember your own tragedies and triumphs, to actually feel these things. I want to ask you to connect also, to continue to connect with one another, irrespective of backgrounds and lived experiences, and to really reach out and call upon from one another greater intimacy and vulnerability and the fullness of who we are as human beings to wrestle with what we are facing. And more importantly than that, I want to call us to courage, to be courageous, and to know that by being in truth and in loving community, that we can change in ways that we can't even imagine. And this is an opportunity to do that. So thank you for being here in community, and let's change ourselves and let's change the world. Thank you.
I knew Ubis would bring it, Serene. Thank you so much. My name is Javier. I'm with the Coalition for a Safer Albuquerque. Thank you all for coming today for this conversation, and thank you to everybody who's joining via Zoom. We have the hybrid option this afternoon. So I want to just give you a quick description of our format for today's meeting. Today's conversation is about restoring dignity to the public square. So much of this conversation has descended into it's challenging, this state of affairs in Albuquerque that we're all living through, and we want to bring forth the heart in this time of kind of a brutal existence. So we are bringing forth 3 stories of folks who are going to be talking about their lived experience on the street, in the system, and then we're going to get into a lightning round. So we're including 9 questions that we'll get a little deeper into the policies involved here. But after each of those stories, we're going to ask each of the 4 candidates to respond with 3 minutes. And they can choose, we'll post all the questions up that are related to each of these subjects, and they can choose to respond to any that they like. Want to let you know that the restrooms are right down this hallway. You head down that doorway and make a right, and they'll be on your left-hand side. We're going to keep strict to our time limits. We have strict timekeeping. We'll give you a yellow card at 30 seconds, and then a red card, and we'll ring a bell when the time runs out, because we want to stick to the schedule. please feel free to stay after for cookies and drinks in the lobby and get to know the candidates and some of the folks who are sharing their stories. And I just want to say that, it takes a lot to be able to share your story in front of an audience like this. Some of them are doing it for their first time. So we want to respect the vulnerability that they're putting forth and just ask for no heckling and just lots of respect. The candidates have been provided the main questions in advance, but not the lightning round questions. So you'll hear their responses towards the end of the event. Okay. Let's get started. Okay. So I want to introduce you to Tiffany. I met Tiffany as part of our organizing cohort this summer, where we brought together 8 different folks from around the sector. Tiffany was one of our folks who just recently was enduring being unhoused, and she's such a leader out there, such an incredible individual, a natural leader, knows just about everybody under each of these bridges, and one of the organizers of this brand new homeless union, which is firing up. So please help me welcome Tiffany, one of the greatest stories of resiliency, to share with us her story.
Hello. Good afternoon, friends, family, mayoral candidates. My name is Tiffany Ledger. I'm here in front of you all today to talk about my experiences on the street and being homeless. For just under 2 years, I was unhoused. I'm none of the labels that people throw at us: dangerous, lazy, a thief. I lost my housing when my grandfather passed away, and the ground disappeared beneath me. During these 2 years, walking around the streets of Albuquerque, I've gotten to meet and know a lot of people out on the streets and their stories about how they became homeless and why they stay homeless, or whatever their story may be. Living unhoused, I became very familiar with the housing voucher system, and I can tell you that it's broken. The questionnaire is confusing and asks more personal questions than it should. The waiting lists are impossibly long, and no one ever knows where they're at in line. On top of that, if you miss 3 phone calls from the housing authority, they throw you off the list and they make you start all over from ground one. Which, to not have a cell phone, to not have the same case manager, and to not have the same contacts, you can't hold me accountable for not being able to be gotten a hold of when the means aren't there for me to be able to be gotten a hold of. It took me 2 years to finally get a voucher, and I had to do it by myself with no case manager. The system doesn't let you apply unless you have a case manager, so it was very difficult to get through to anywhere to do anything until I got a case manager finally. But I had already done all the footwork, so all they had to do was fill out the applications. And while people wait, sweeps of encampments take away what little we managed to hold on to. I've lost everything I owned: my license, my birth certificate, social, my laptop, my backpacks, everything I had. And it's not right. If we truly want people to succeed, we have to make the system work better for the realities of being unhoused. Something as simple as a voicemail bank, which I'm working on with somebody that has an LLC to get off the ground and running. Oh, sorry. My dream is that it'll help with receiving and maintaining communication with vouchers, doctors, and even loved ones, knowing that they have a direct line to get a hold of their unhoused friends and family. And we have to also think carefully about what we're asking of people. Imagine living with all the freedom that comes with the streets and then suddenly being forced into housing with curfew and restrictions that don't meet you where you are. The transition is not easy. It takes understanding, not punishment. Some of the shelters, if you don't make it home for the night, you lose your bed, which I don't think is fair. We have all the freedom of the streets, and now you want me to be somewhere every night. I'm not here just to share my struggles in the system, but to say that these problems are fixable. I'm proud that we've organized a homeless union in Albuquerque, and together we can hopefully bridge the gap in failed communication between the lawmakers and the unhoused. So to our elected officials, are you going to continue with this cruel and unusual path of committed sweeps that put every unhoused person behind bars or in mental hospitals, or are you going to take the path less chosen?
Thanks so much, Tiffany. Beautiful work. Okay, so our questions to our candidates regarding Tiffany's story, and again, these have been provided to the candidates before. In light of the devastating impact on the individuals whose property is thrown out, confiscated, or lost forever, can you envision a more humane approach than the current sweep policy going forward? Next question. What, if anything, would your mayoral administration do differently regarding people sleeping outdoors? And lastly, how will you navigate the current city paralysis and resistance to safe outdoor spaces by neighbors, neighborhood associations, and businesses? We'll start with candidate Luis Sanchez.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me here. How long is the time?
3 minutes.
Okay.
For all three questions, we have 3 minutes?
Yeah, you can choose,
Just
You pick a
choose-
question.
You pick one of the questions and you have
right, you
3
form a
minutes.
hybrid within those 3 minutes. Sorry.
Okay. So make sure you're following the rules.
So thank you for that.
Okay, we just want to know what the rules are, so if you could start my time now, please.
Okay, our timekeeper is right back here, so keep an eye on Maria.
Hi, Maria Elena. How are you doing today? So basically, I've been a law enforcement officer for 26 years. And during the 26-year time out on the streets of Albuquerque, I've actually seen and witnessed a lot of different things out on the streets. I've witnessed the drug addiction. I witnessed the drug cartels. I've actually now, as city councilor, I've been involved in dealing with the opioid settlement agreement in reference to how the money is being spent. One of the things that I've heard more than anything is that we have programs out there, but the programs aren't just doing the job that they need to be doing. What's happening is the programs are actually breaking down right in the middle of the help that the individuals are receiving. So while they're receiving the help, they're losing the connectivity that needs to be happening, because everybody needs to move from one program to the next and then to the next, and to find themselves and find where they need to be. One of the things that I saw while we were out there is the amount of people who actually lose their own responsibility for themselves. And that's being involved in the drug situation. I can't tell you how many lives I saved just by being out there on the streets. During the wintertime, we would actually go out and do our sweeps and make sure that everybody that was out on the streets were being taken care of, to make sure that they had a place to stay, that they weren't out freezing each and every night. So with that, I think what we need to make sure that we're doing is we need to continue to make sure that we are auditing the systems that are out there, making sure that they're working the correct way, because right now we're hearing that they're not working the way they're supposed to be working, and in certain areas we're dropping the ball. So with that, I just want to make sure that I'm hearing everybody. I want to make sure that people are talking to us at the mayor's office, so that we understand the situations that are going on. It's really, really important that we make sure that we save lives, but we have situations out there that are also inhumane. And when we're watching people sleep in the filth and the disease areas, it makes it very, very difficult to see. So we need to make sure that we're trying to get people out of that situation. So it's really kind of a push-pull, and we need to really, really work together with the community to make sure that we have good answers. Thank you.
Sure, thanks so much, and I just want to start this yellow puppy mic. All right, check in there. I can just shout.
I did that for you. Okay, this one works. Okay, so, first Tiffany, I want to thank you for sharing your story. I want to honor what you've been through and what you've put up with. And also your willingness to share that with us, to make us better candidates, and I think lift up this community in terms of how we can do things better. And your story to me highlighted a couple of things behind these questions. And one is that, number one, services should always be offered. Storage of belongings should always be offered, and transportation should always be offered. These were massive holes in our system, and they still are. But when I came in, we had no one to actually offer those services. And so we created the Community Safety Department. That was something that now has outreach directly to the street for over 100,000 people, trained social workers. We're the only city in the country that has that. And so those folks can offer transportation, literally in their car. They can also have to have somewhere to take people. So it's like, if you want help, how can you get off the street and then somewhere? So one, ACS can transport, but they're not available everywhere. That's why we have to expand it. That's why we need 4 ACS dispatch locations throughout the city. And then they have to have, you've got to have somewhere to go. And I think that time that Tiffany spoke of how weeks went by when identification wasn't offered, and then the challenges with the system, that is all part of what we hope to do somewhere in the gateway system. You know, before the gateway system, there was literally nowhere that the city ran to go, nowhere. The city didn't have a single employee helping the unhoused, not one. And now we have a whole department doing that. We do have roughly 1,000 beds available. Some of them are for recovery, some of them are for families, some of them are for teens, but we need more, which is why I keep pushing the system. And then at the end of that, we obviously need housing. And sometimes we need to get, for example, Tiffany, directly to housing. Skip all the paperwork and let's get to supportive housing. That takes a collaborative effort with the county and the city. But it also means that we have to have a variety of places where people can go no matter what their situation is, which is why I support safe outdoor spaces and have for years. We have to loosen the restrictions. When council passed that, after I sent it to them, they layered it all up with all these restrictions to make them basically impossible for a church like this to just take care of 10 people who are living outside because they choose to. That's what we're proposing in the new code reforms that are going down to city council. And that is what I hope will pass, because we need a range of solutions to people in Tiffany's situation. And that range of solutions also, of course, has to include some form of treatment, whether it's peer treatment, whether it's medically supervised or otherwise. And that's why the offerings that we're trying to build, we need more and we need help, but we do have medical respite finally at the gateway. We do have medical sobering at the gateway. These are things, and we have a 24/7 emergency drop-off. But one, they're not all utilized enough. And two, we have to have more. If there are 5,000 people on the street and we only have 1,000 places where they can get help, which is currently the math, we don't have enough. That's why we have to expand these services. And we've got to make sure also that we listen to our partners, because our partners want to do more. And it's frankly government regulations that slow down things like vouchers. It's the strings attached to federal money. It's the strings attached to all the different flavors of money in the reporting requirements. Meanwhile, people sit on the street. That's also what we have to fix.
Thank you, Tiffany, for sharing your story. I have walked these streets with many of you over the past 5 weeks, knocking on doors and meeting my neighbors, those who live in houses and those who do not. And the story that I've heard is very similar to yours. It's the indifference of a bureaucratic system that is not making it easy for folk who are in the most difficult situation to receive the most basic services. And the things that I heard you talk about were not about whether or not there was a shelter space somewhere, or whether or not a service was offered, but the fact that it was so hard for you to connect with them. And that not being on you, that being on the government who is throwing the things in your way. And so what I see here is a system that needs to be overhauled. I see a government in a city that needs to work for the people. I see structures and checklists and boxes and bureaucracy that should instead be used getting people to housing and support and treatment, but instead seem to be used to get in their way. The basic human dignity of people is lost when we throw away their most precious belongings. One of the people I spoke with on the street about a month ago told me his father's ashes were among the things that were thrown away. And beyond the personal, right? Beyond the moral, the number one thing that folks lose through an encampment sweep, 200 of which happen every week, is their IDs. And what can you do without an ID? Right? What makes it impossibly hard for you to get into housing, to get a job, to move your life forward, is when we throw away not just the things that make you, you, but the things that make you to the system, right? And so we're doubling down on this government inefficiency and bureaucracy by both making it impossible and then throwing away the things that you need to get the services. And so what I see is a desperate need for us for an alternative, for a government who serves the people and walks the streets like I did, like so many of you do, like our UNM street medics who I see here, like the folk in ACS, like the folk who we need talking to people as people, and giving basic human dignity to those who share our city. What that looks like is connecting them with the services that they need, whether it be medical, whether it be treatment, whether it be housing, and actually making that connection land, and not saying, here's a list of places you can go and the numbers you can call, but instead saying, sitting with you and saying, hey, when was the last time you took your medication? Hey, what do you need for that foot? Hey, what do you need to get into housing? Where's your ID? How can we help? Right? It's that proactive stance and that work to get people to the services that we owe them as a community that is lacking and desperately needed today. Thank you.
Thank you all for having me, and thank you, Tiffany, for sharing your story. I know how difficult it can be to share something so personal. So the sweeping of, whose property is thrown out, confiscated, or lost forever. And I can only imagine, I started my career in banking, and identity theft, I would have clients come in because of identity theft, and the trauma it would cause them because the cost of getting those things replaced. And these are people that maybe have alternative sources for IDs. So one day I was walking down Central with my partner, and we were watching a sweep, and it wasn't right on Central, it was off of Central, and we were watching a sweep, and they were just picking up stuff and putting them in a city garbage truck. And I remember, because I had done a community kind of meet and greet at the International District, and this woman who lived in the area and was a homeowner and said, it breaks my heart when I see them take their stuff because we don't know what's in there. And it really hit home when I watched it, because I'm like, if somebody came into just my home and took what was precious to me, what I needed to live, how would I really feel? How would that impact me? It's one thing to have your stuff stolen, but in front of you, taken. Like, what is that? So I didn't really understand what and I looked, and I didn't understand what the city sweep policy was. I don't, and please correct me, if somebody's found it, please share it with me. But I could not find what the sweep policy was. So to directly answer that question, I think we need to have a more compassionate approach and a standard operating procedure on when you, if the city is going to continue to sweep and clean these camps, and you said 200 a week, I mean, that's a lot, but there needs to be a process so that we can protect their valuables. But also I understand that there are some situations where they can't be in that particular space and be camping there. And we really need to understand what we're taking from people when we're doing that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, candidates. We're going to move on to our next set of story and questions. I would like to introduce you to Bren, who I've had the real privilege of getting to know through the Homeless Union, and just seeing them fire up this organization, having meetings every 2 weeks. On Tuesday, we'll invite you later on to their meeting on Tuesday night, where they'll have City Councilor Nicole Rogers speaking at the International District Library. But Bren is a remarkable individual, enduring some of the toughest things that life throws at us. She has a master's, a former educator, one of the fiercest analyses you'll hear, and one of the founders of the Homeless Union, along with her dog, Ronan. So please help me welcome Bren Bitter.
My dog's gonna stay over there for now. But so as Javier said, my name is Bren. My pronouns are they, them. I am a founding member of the Albuquerque Homeless Union. Yes, this coming Tuesday, we will be at the International District at 3:00 in the afternoon with Councilwoman Nicole Rogers. So anyone who would like to learn the process of speaking at city council meetings, this is your opportunity to learn from the city council themselves. I have been homeless since April 14th of this year, when I was evicted from my apartment after one missed partial payment. I am disabled. I have a master's degree in secondary education. I'm a licensed New Mexico public educator. I have spent a decade in our classroom teaching our middle school students New Mexico history. And my career ended in 2022 when I faced discrimination at my school from parents, staff, colleagues, and students over my pronouns. We like to sometimes imagine that what's happening at the national level is far away from us over here in New Mexico, and it is not. It is happening to us personally. I have been unable to work since that experience. The bulk of my homelessness has been inside the women's shelter at the Gateway Housing Navigation Center, which is part of the Gibson Gateway Hub complex. I spent 4.5 months in the shelter, and I experienced both heading home and Chicanos por la Casa as the organization overseeing shelter operations. I would best describe the shelter as prison light. From the 9 p.m. curfew, that, as Tiffany said, if we are not there for that 9 p.m. curfew, we are kicked out of the shelter that night onto the streets and lose our beds. To the designated meal times, the shelter implements restrictive policies that limit our individual freedoms. They punish participants who have varying needs, and they infringe on our protected civil rights. My disability is largely affected by my environment. My sensory sensitivities do not like bright lights, crowded environments, noisy spaces. Speaking up here in front of you all right now is extremely anxiety-inducing for me. I experienced all of these triggers on a daily basis during my 175 days living inside that shelter. Any efforts that I attempted to make to alleviate my symptoms and to accommodate myself were dismissed by the staff. I was forced to reach out to Disability Rights New Mexico to receive an advocate to help me advocate for my disability rights. Our efforts to negotiate those accommodations with Heading Home were ignored. Heading Home knew that their contract would end in a few weeks with the city, so they treated me like I was not their problem. They ignored any attempt that we made to schedule a meeting with them and their directors. They allowed their contract with the city to end and for Chicanos por la Casa to take over with no mention of any attempts I had made prior for my accommodations. My advocate and I were forced to start over at square one on August 1st when Chicanos por la Casa took control of the contract. When I was finally able to secure a meeting with my advocate, CPLC, and a member of the city staff at the Gateway on August 29th. I had been in the shelter since May 4th. And August 29th was the first time I was able to receive an actual meeting to negotiate my accommodations. I was then dismissed from the facility and evicted from the shelter 2 weeks later. I was not provided any documentation regarding my discharge, nor did I get an exit interview. According to my caseworker, she was instructed to discharge me and provide me with a printout of the West Side Shelter shuttle schedules. At no point did anyone ask me for my side of the story. I was just told to leave. I have no ability to appeal CPLC's decision to exit me from the shelter because no such process exists. From the moment I entered the shelter, I was met with hostility from staff, unnecessary power struggles, and living conditions that bordered on human torture. Heading Home required all shelter participants to sleep under the full lights on all night long. I spent my first 2 weeks barking up the city channels to finally get a meeting with Heading Home and the city of Albuquerque about the lights in the dorms. Through my own advocacy, we were able to finally change that environment condition and sleep with the lights off. I have become aware that there are a handful of major barriers that prevent shelter residents from being able to effectively advocate for ourselves. First is that many residents lack the general knowledge of who and how to contact to file grievances. Knowing that poverty and undereducation go hand in hand, this is not surprising. Second is that all grievances within the shelter systems are internal. Every resident in that shelter knows and understands that the staff member that harmed you will see the grievance that you filed against them. It is our word as residents against the companies. The third is fear. Residents are afraid of retaliation for filing a grievance. We all know that the shelters laud the threat of street homelessness over our heads as coercion for compliance with their policies, regardless of how inhumane they are. I have had my food taken from me while I was still eating. We are being afraid of being put out on the streets because we know it is a death sentence. The average age inside of the women's shelter on Gibson is 55 years old. The vast majority of those residents are on disability and Social Security, and we are there because there is no place for us to afford to live. One of the things we would like to see is a residence council within our shelters that is democratically elected among the residents and by the residents. We want to democratize our shelter system and put the power of the living conditions within the hands of the residents of the shelters. We want a neutral ombudsman that will receive the grievances that we file against these companies that the city contracts with and pays our tax dollars for, to oversee those grievances in a neutral manner. Democratizing our shelters is a way to move this towards the actual trauma-informed care that we as a community understand is happening inside the Gateway Center. My experience for 175 days was anything but trauma-informed. Homeless people are not prisoners. We are not criminals simply because we cannot afford to pay rent. My crime was a missed $500 payment, and my sentence for that crime has been exile and death. We do not forfeit our civil rights when we become homeless. By democratizing our shelters and giving power to the residents, we are empowering our most vulnerable citizens to take charge of their own destinies. And we are ensuring that the trauma-informed practice serves the needs of the people that it is serving. My own story is the only one that I can share, but it is not unique. Every single resident inside the shelter system in this city has a major grievance against the organization that oversees that shelter. Doubly so for our residents who are trapped on the west side.
Thank you so much, Fran. So we will now go to the questions related to Bren's story. And the first question is, what steps would you take to improve the shelter system and incorporate trauma-informed services? Number two, would you implement an ombudsman approach to provide a structured process for grievances and appeals in the shelter system? And then number three, what lessons can you learn, for example, the Good Neighbor Agreement, from the current Gateway East opening with regard to opening facilities in other neighborhoods? And just for the audience's sake, I was thinking about this as Bren was talking, but just so you know, Chicanos por la Causa is a $1 billion corporation. That's their name, but that's who's on contract to run services in the West Side Shelter. That's what they're referring to. Okay, so let's get to the candidates. So let's start on the opposite end this time with
Thank
Ms.
you.
Harmon.
Well, I feel like Brent answered all the questions for me, so as far as providing the answers, and you made great suggestions, and so maybe we should switch seats. No, you don't want to. Okay, that's okay. So ombudsman. So let's talk about that. So in the Navy, 15 years Navy reservist, 4 years active duty. We always had an ombudsman wherever I was, whether it was in an active duty station or deployed. We had an ombudsman. And you should always have that in any organization. It is a great position to have because that person has direct contact to the mayor, to the leadership. They mitigate going through, like you said, you spent 2 weeks trying to figure it out. What if you just went to the ombudsman went straight to the mayor and things could get settled, or to the CAO, right? I think that's a great idea. Absolutely, let's implement that. I think the other thing, if I could add to what you suggested, was a homeless bill of rights, right? We have patients' bill of rights, like know your rights as homeless. Like maybe we should be posting those rights in the homeless shelters so that you know what you can do, but also you have somebody to contact. So I really feel like you've addressed all of this, and I'm just going to take your notes when we're done here. And if you want to share those, I would be happy to take those on. It's unfortunate that you had to go through that. And if you can vouch for that, I'm sorry too. You know, it is a struggle to be $500. My father, I have the same situation. My father, my senior year in high school, could not afford to get us pay for housing one month, and we were living in a tent on the side of a lake. And so just because he had to pay my brother's tuition to go to UNM. So I understand what one paycheck means to a family. And it's disheartening that we are in a system that has been developed and we've put in structures and places and things to do to keep people from being homeless. But like Mr. Sanchez said earlier, the implementation or the system, the management of it is not working. And you are proof to that, and you vouched for it back there. And so what is it? What is it that we're missing that we need to do it? And if it's an ombudsman, let's do this. If it's having a homeless bill of rights, let's list those. Let's let you guys know what your rights are. Just because you're homeless doesn't mean you are subhuman or subpar. And again, I thank you so much for sharing your story because it hits home. What you shared hits home with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brent. It's great to see you again. Thank you for your advocacy and your fight for folks on the streets and in our shelters. I think it's a really important point for all of us to remember that it could be anybody. It could be any of us. And I know, those simply because you're on the street doesn't make you a criminal, but I'll draw the analog for myself who have been in criminal justice for the past 15 years. Just because you're a criminal doesn't make you less than human. And these are both categories of people who it's our responsibility to take care of with basic dignity. And the best way that I saw that as U.S. attorney was in building this program we're here in partnership with the city called the Violence Intervention Program. A program that relies on people who are peer support workers with lived experience. Because this is the way that we structurally incorporate folks who have the perspective of who the people we serve and what they need into how we build the programs and the services for them. And it's also a critical part of the feedback loop to know how it's working, which is that communication with the folks who are going through the system, which is why for me it was important to walk the streets and talk with people who live on them, which is why as a prosecutor it's important for me to meet with criminal defendants and see their experience of the system. Because this is how we build the systems that serve the people we up here, the electeds and the leaders, are supposed to serve with basic human dignity. And so I think it's both having those lived experiences as meaningful voices within the building of our things, and the ongoing training for the people who may maybe not have that, right? In terms of our homeless shelters, what I'm thinking about is ongoing disability rights training, ongoing training for sensitivity to the needs of the LGBTQ population who disproportionately falls onto the streets, often need, unique approaches in how we are sheltering and caring for them. And so it's about giving this training to our people. It's about that basic human dignity and how we treat our neighbors. And most importantly, I think it's about prioritizing that lived experience, having that feedback loop, whether it be the democratic process, the unionizing, or through a neutral ombudsman. But that way that leadership hears what is happening in the shelters, on the streets, to our neighbors, and then can react in a meaningful way to build the dignity that they deserve in their services.
Well, Brent, I think I just want to start by how appalling your story is. And that is something that no one should have to experience in general, let alone in one of our shelters. I've been in that shelter many times. I've been in the women's shelter. And I cannot believe that was happening, and that we were there talking about how great the shelter is, and that's what's happening behind the scenes. So I think first, I'd be happy to talk to you after, but number one is things like an ombudsman, things like the resident advisory council, a good neighbor agreement. We have most of those, but even a homeless bill of rights, and all of that, I am happy to start working on now, regardless if I'm around again. And so I also want you to know that, one of the reasons why the city changed out those providers was because we heard all those negative things. But to hear that the new provider is still a challenge, that is a different issue. Yeah. And this is important for me and for the city to hear and for city council to hear. So I'm glad that that's part of what you're working on as well. Because there were not many firms that applied. And, you know, they are also part of Help New Mexico. I mean, I know, Javier, like, that's a complicated story. They are a nonprofit, they're huge. They run shelters in Phoenix, I understand that. But what was also challenging is that Heading Home is local. And they were not doing a good job by every measure. And so we have to also address the shortage of how we can do this. But to me, there is some answers in the fact that residents can run a lot of this themselves. That, to me, is, I think, the direction where we should go. And that's a specific direction that can include all of those things that you outlined. That's underneath this notion of democratizing our shelters. I love that. It is the residents' council, it is the ombudsman, but it's like also, okay, we may have to figure out when to deliver food. You know, no one should ever take it from someone who's eating, but, you know, there are logistics about food delivery. We got to figure out safety. You know, the point about 9 o'clock, if it doesn't work, it shouldn't be 9 o'clock. We know that at times you have to close and make sure that there's no one else there, make sure that there's no contraband, those kinds of things. They should never be done in an inhuman way. And that's what I heard from your story, and I think that's what's so terrible. I'll also just add, you know, having been through the process of all the fighting and all the hard work to literally create that shelter, right? And all of the scorn, frankly, for wasting taxpayer money on shelters, which is what I've put up with for 7 years. That is never, ever wasting money. We should be spending as much as possible on those who need it the most. And that is literally what this work is supposed to be. So it's even worse, though, to hear that after you do that, after you fight the fight that is the right fight, that all of a sudden you have that experience. It makes it even more, I think, tragic for everyone who's been supporting these efforts. And I would also just add that, you know, at the end of the day, these are things that we are trying to do the right thing about. And when we find out that it is not working, we have to change what we're doing immediately. And that's what I'm offering to do Monday.
Bryn, thank you for sharing this. Your story has come to me more often than not as a city councilor. I've been listening to stories just like yours, trying to make sure that the things are getting done. If there's anyone in your situation, you can always give me a call and I'll get direct access to whatever's going on out there and make sure that we work through it. That's something I've always done as city councilor. That's something I'll continue to do as mayor. If you have a problem, you have an issue, and you bring it to my attention, I will make sure that it gets fixed immediately. I do that right now as a city councilor. Right now, all the city councilors, we're all directed to go to an online system to make sure that we get that documented and make sure that everything's done. So it goes through a bureaucracy. Currently, I refuse to use the bureaucracy, and I go straight to the director who's in charge and put the director in charge right in contact with the individual who needs it, so that way their issue and their problem gets worked out immediately. I like the ombudsman idea, and I think that we should have a case management situation as well, so that we can follow everything that's going on with your case. You should be able to respond to what's happening. There should be a back and forth dialogue with not only the people that are providing the care, but also with the individuals receiving it, to make sure that that care is being done correctly and by the rules. That's one of the things that I've always fought for, is to make sure that there's rules in place so that everybody can make sure that they follow the rules, and that if somebody violates the rules, then you have to answer to those violations. And if you're doing everything right and you're doing things the way they're supposed to be done and set up, and that includes not only the person who's receiving the services, but the individual who's giving the services. I actually think that the person who's giving the services has even a greater responsibility to show the compassion and to show the expertise, and also to set an example for every single person that's out there receiving those services. Because if you're setting a really good example and you go into that service and you're a service provider with a spirit of excellence, that's going to actually resonate with the individual that you're working with. And that's the kind of services that I want to see provided, is services that actually help everybody be better as they move forward. And I will hold the responsibility as mayor to make sure that those service providers are taken care of and that the individuals who are receiving the services are getting what they're supposed to get. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, candidates. We'll move on to our next story, which is an incredible story of overcoming as well. James Freeman endured homelessness here coming from Texas 8 or 9 years ago, now serves as a rock star advocate via HopeWorks and the New Mexico Coalition to End Homelessness, one of the biggest hearts in the city, and can rattle off any numbers about vouchers, et cetera, you need to know. So I'm glad you get to meet him. Please welcome James.
Good afternoon, y'all. I am James Freeman. Nearly a decade ago, I found myself precariously housed and homeless here in Albuquerque. This was one of the most challenging times of my life. During that time, I stayed at the West Side, stayed at the Albuquerque Opportunity Center and Joy Junction. I must say for me, these were adequate shelters of last resort, but I also spent several months sleeping outside on a piece of cardboard. One span of that period, it rained continuously and I developed severe trench rot in my feet. They were blistered over so bad, I thought they were going to have to be amputated. And I got down on my knees and I prayed to God and I said, God, if you get me out of this horrible circumstance, I will never forget where I came from. I'll never forget what I've been through. I'll devote the rest of my life to ending chronic homelessness here in Albuquerque. And God granted me with the housing voucher. Receiving the housing voucher was the most consequential moment in my life. That voucher allowed me to attend college and earn human services and social work degrees. Often I hear this narrative that most people who are homeless and outside do it by choice. This narrative is absurd and disgusting. As someone who's been a team leader of the PIT count the last 3 years, there is no basis for this narrative. Yes, there are a handful of people that feel safer outside around their community than in a shelter, but these are edge cases. I never chose to sleep outside. I'm a big guy. I used to be a lot heavier back then, and I was terrified to sleep outside. I never slept more than a couple of hours at a time. While outside, I witnessed the most brutal assaults, sexual assaults you can possibly imagine. No one would choose to see what I saw, and no one would choose to experience what I've experienced. It's commendable that the city has invested over $100 million in creating the most advanced homeless shelter system in the world, but no one has ever changed the direction of their life at a homeless shelter. The city has created a massive bottleneck within the shelter system where people are being warehoused in the shelters for years and years without ever receiving a housing voucher. The administration and the city council continue to reduce the funding for housing vouchers. I beg you to encourage your representatives to significantly increase the amount of funding for housing vouchers. Several years ago, the city allocated $16 million for housing vouchers. Then it was reduced to $12 million. And then this time it's been reduced to $8 million. $8 million only funds 596 households to be housed. We need a serious investment in housing vouchers to make any progress toward ending chronic homelessness in Albuquerque. Thank you. Wait. Stop. I've done nothing. I've achieved nothing. I've accomplished nothing. Simply as a survivor, I do not deserve your praise. As long as there are one family in the Hawthorne, one person at the Gateway West, one person at Gateway Youth, or one person sleeping on a piece of cardboard, I have failed. We've all failed. Get active, get involved, roll up your sleeves, hold these politicians to account. Clap for yourselves when we have increased housing vouchers to $50 million a year or $100 million a year. That's the only way we're going to end chronic homelessness here in Albuquerque. Thank you.
We can't go wrong with this kind of leadership and energy. So, yeah, this is the beginning of something really powerful. Thank you all. Okay, so the question's related to James's story, to our candidates. So number one, Albuquerque's voucher system provides a limited number of vouchers a month, yet we know that the demand is 2 to 3 times that. How would the voucher system be improved under your mayoral administration? Number two, what are your thoughts about what comes after a stay at the shelter, after transitional housing, supportive housing, et cetera, beyond the crisis response? Number three, there are more than that there are more than a few thousand vacant buildings along the Central Avenue and 4th Street corridors in Albuquerque. What role should our mayor play in using those vacant buildings to reduce the number of people sleeping outdoors? And number 4, what proactive steps would you take to confront obstacles to affordable housing developments like zoning and neighborhood association resistance? We'll start with candidate Alex Ubayas this time.
Thank you, James. It's good to see you again. Thank you for your advocacy, for your fight, for sharing your story with us, and your passion. I think that there is something incredibly important here, right? Which is we are failing our neighbors when there isn't adequate places for them to live in. It's a basic human right to have somewhere to stay, something to eat, medical care that you need, and a community that cares about you. And so this is what your city should be delivering to you. The thing I think about a lot when we talk about the housing vouchers, and about the gateway system, about our shelter networks, is the fact that there are these massive gaps in between them. That often what happens is you come in, you receive services for 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, and then you're pushed out, and you're back on the streets where you began, because there's nothing closing the gap between you and the housing that you need. That you'll have housing vouchers, and maybe you'll be put up in a hotel for 60 days. And then the hotel gets shut down. Everyone gets pushed out, and they're back on the streets where they began. This is our challenge as government and our responsibility to build this transitional housing, the next step out of the gateway, the place for people to go once they have received that crisis response, that crisis shelter that they need that night to deal with their medical issues, to get off of the streets in the freezing cold or the wet. But knowing that that's not enough, and there has to be a next step. The next step has to involve housing. And it has to, for many of our friends on the streets, also involve the wraparound services, the medical treatments, and the drug addiction treatments necessary to keep folks in that housing. We have to close that gap between the crisis shelter and the transitional housing. We have to close that gap between the housing vouchers and the next step into houses. Because if we don't do this, right, we're throwing a bunch of money at a stopgap solution that hides people, but doesn't solve the problems. And so I think we need to deeply invest not only in more housing for people through vouchers, through building more housing, through assuring that whenever we have developers getting tax breaks, there's also affordable housing being built there. For assuring that whenever we're giving out housing vouchers, right, there's somewhere to land at the end of that. There's a plan for it. To make sure that when we are taking care of our neighbors, we are seeing it all the way through. And so for me, that is our promise to you. And I ask you to hold us all accountable, whoever it is on the stage who sits in that mayor's chair, because it is voices like yours and from the community, that feedback and that lived experience that tells us what is and what isn't working, what we need to do and we shouldn't be doing, and help us guide us all to the community that we deserve. Thank you, James.
Well, James, it's good to have this discussion because when you and I last interacted, as you know, we used each other often, and it was the addiction treatment at HopeWorks that the city and the county and we helped happen. And the difference between your analysis now and then, I think, is really profound. And I think in many ways it does reflect the city. Remember, 8 years ago, there were 0 beds, 0. There were none. Now, today, obviously, you hear about these experiences. And where I think in many ways we are in a rut is the gateway is not supposed to be the end. It is literally called the gateway because it's a gateway to housing. That is what the name is from. And we know this from advocating for this. We have asked for more voucher money every single year since I have been in office. Every single year. We have asked the state legislature for housing voucher money, and they say it's the city's problem. And so vouchers absolutely is the next piece in that puzzle, and we desperately need it. So I will keep doing that, but I think the challenge is a lot of us are saying what we want. We want vouchers. We want housing. That's easy. It's actually easy to get up here and tell you what we need or what you want. Leadership, being mayor, it's about how to get that done. That's what we've struggled with. We've wanted more vouchers for half a decade. So I would propose to you a couple of things. What we're doing with housing in terms of hotels is an example of how. You know, we find these hotels that are homes of trafficking and of drug use, and we convert them into low-income housing. This is what we've done at multiple locations up and down Central, and we have to do more of it. Office buildings, we have empty office buildings downtown, empty. This is what we are trying to do at San Mateo and Central. We want to convert that into affordable housing. That building permit is literally going to the developer on Monday. So we've got to support that project because they're going to need all sorts of support down the road. That is hundreds of new housing units. And then we've got to continue to problem solve in a sense that I think we need dedicated revenue. You know what, if you want money, you know how to get it? You make it so politicians can't take it. So why don't we put some things together? Like, how about for the developers who are developing all these new places and fancy homes, let's tie impact fees to housing vouchers. Then you get your housing vouchers. That's what I want to do as your mayor.
Well, when I look at this situation, I look at it as accountability. James, I think I see you every week, once a week, and we have conversations every week about what's going on. And I think one of the biggest conversations we have is about accountability. And if you remember, what we learned in city council is that there was many vouchers that didn't even get used. Is that something that you all recall? Who's accountable for that? That's the city administration. So as we move forward, we need to make sure that accountability and transparency is one of the main factors that we use when we're making sure that these vouchers are used to the fullest extent. And we know that this year they were not. So we need to make sure that accountability and transparency happens. We see so much of that being pushed under the rug right now in reference to accountability. We have six OIG reports that aren't out there that we all need to know about. So accountability and transparency is extremely, extremely important in order to handle any of these situations. When we're dealing with these programs, we need to deal with the programs in kind of a way that we dealt with them when we were all attending school, because we find somebody that needs the help. They are just getting out of addiction. So when they're getting out of that addiction, let's say, for example, you know, they're in a first grade process. We need that education to continue to move forward until you're in middle school, and then move forward until you're in high school, until you're in college, and just kind of compare that to moving forward in life. And moving forward and helping with your responsibilities, helping the direction in the correct way that needs to be happening, so that every single person has that stage and knows where that next predictability is. One of the other things that we need to do is we need to make sure that we are building affordable housing, and that we are building all kinds of housing so that we can actually get the competitive level out there so that these prices that we're seeing can come down. You know, I think that permitting right now, and the office of permitting right now, it takes so long just to get a permit, so that we're in a situation where we can't build as quick as we need to build. So we need to do that as well. I think that we need to do partnering with scatter site housing, transitional shelters, and continue to move forward so that everybody knows where their predictability, where they're at, and can predict what their next stage is. And we heard that as well from Bren and James. So if we are moving in the right direction, you can have somebody theoretically come from an addiction state, maybe not even having a house or having a really tough time with their housing, all the way to graduating high school, so to speak, and be back on their own and back on their feet. And that's what I'd like to see happen as me being the mayor of Albuquerque. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing, James. So a couple of things. And I heard the same thing that Mr. Sanchez heard, that there was vouchers left on the table. And it's difficult to justify more money if money's being left on the table when doing city budgets or even federal budgets. So if we're not using all the vouchers, then Mr. Sanchez is correct. There is an accountability, implementation, management issue going on within the city administration that needs to be addressed. That's the first thing. The second thing, James, what I appreciated about your presentation is the bottom line is it comes down to money, right? It comes down to the budget. And what Bernalillo County has done is they've done a 1/8 increment just for housing. And what I'm surprised is that the city has not mirrored that. And they've done, that's been since 2004, or I'm sorry, 14. So if elected, let's look at putting an increment or setting aside an increment. I'm not suggesting raising taxes, so please don't take that back. But taking an increment, setting it aside for housing and vouchers, because like the mayor said, if it's an increment that's totally obligated for housing and vouchers, then nobody's arguing over where the money, if we have enough money, we have set it aside. We are taking care of those particular needs, and we know how much to expect based on the increment that we receive. And then we could look at doing other things. It's not just looking at redeveloping a building, which I find it hard to believe that they're ready to go to permit by Monday, because the capital stack for that building is going to take more than the 23 million that the mayor is suggesting. We're looking at north of 70 million. So I find it hard to believe that we're going to be able to do that. But let me also tell you this. When it comes to housing development and vouchers, it really just comes back down to managing the budget. And we can do that. This budget has grown. What's sad is that the vouchers went from 60 million to 8 million, but this budget has grown 60% since he's been in office. So it really comes down, again, what Mr. Sanchez said, accountability and management. I couldn't say this more, but there are ways to solve this. We have the means to do it. It's not that difficult, and you've already suggested on how to do it. You really have. You've done the math. Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you again, candidates. All right, we're heading into our final round. A story led by actually an interesting segment that I think you all will enjoy. Okay, so this is going to be leading into our lightning round section, and we're going to post, these are actually questions that the candidates did not receive in advance, which they'll be able to respond to with a yes or no answer, or a simple answer, but no, nothing beyond that. So it should be fun. So I want to introduce you to Maria Elena Johnson, who was also part of our organizing cohort this summer, who was just a fierce heart for social justice, actually ran for office in southern New Mexico, and is now organizing here, and is especially called to work with young folks, has a few young folks here today who've been a part of helping getting our organization off the ground. So grateful for her help, and please help me welcome Maria Elena.
Hello, thank you so much. My name is Maria Elena Johnson. I go by MJ. In the spring of 2019, I was a homeowner in southern New Mexico, Chaparral, New Mexico. And then 2 days before Thanksgiving that year, a microburst came through the area and ripped the roof off of our home. And so we became homeless with some weather, which seems kind of strange. That would happen to folks, but that happens quite a bit, as we've all seen in the news. FEMA helped us out for about 10 days, and then my friends from high school, they helped me for about a year. We became renters, and we became vulnerable to the system. We ended up coming up to Santa Fe, New Mexico, because we took a leap of faith. We're like, let's move out of the area, let's go up north, let's see if opportunities will touch us there. And they did for a while, and then my mother died. I had been a caretaker for my parents for the last 13 years of their lives, and there was no help. It was just me and my paycheck, and my son, and some friends. About 10 days after my mother died, when they say don't do rash things after someone passes, I decided to leave the family home with my children. and we ended up on the streets of Albuquerque for about 2 days. Thankfully, we ended up in the Hawthorne. Now, I wasn't sure what to expect. I'm from rural New Mexico. So to me, city life should be a little bit more organized, a little bit more put together. It's city life, right? Us slow country bumpkins. But when I arrived at Hawthorne, amongst my trauma, it grounded me in my organizing work when I noticed that a lot of the folks that were in positions of leadership in the facility were not the kindest folk. And I started paying attention to the dignity that was being robbed every day. It doesn't cost a lot to just be kind to folks and to just remember, we gotta keep the dignity in place. It's very important for our human existence. The second we start to lose our dignity, we become what some folks would consider feral. And as I witnessed a lot of these employees, folks put in place to nurture us, to help us along the way, I started to get angrier and angrier because I realized we were putting people in positions of empathy and compassion that were just looking for a paycheck. Folks were not being vetted. I know we talk about these lovely individuals up here in leadership. This is hard. This is hard. We got to go all the way down. All the way down. It starts at the roots. That was really my most disheartening thing that I experienced at the Hawthorne. Thankfully, it took me 67 days to rehouse myself with the help of a housing voucher from Cuidando los Niños. Now, we talk about these housing vouchers, but before folks get these housing vouchers, they have to do some metrics about themselves. Now, I don't have a raging drug addiction. I don't have to see a therapist. I'm not running from domestic violence. But there are some really strange stipulations, at least when I experienced, for folks to get these vouchers. And then if you miss something, it's just a regular person, fulana and fulano, and their prerogative. So if they've had a terrible day, guess what? You're up the creek. It really matters who is in charge of the souls on the streets. I'm thankful for a man named Ramon Torres. He is an employee at Cuidando los Niños. Ramon Torres has been by my side to this day, calling in and checking in and seeing how I'm doing. He was the thread, and it stuck to me, and he made sure that I've been doing okay and that my kids have been doing okay ever since. It's been, 3 years now? And Ramon still calls, and we still check in. Dignity, it's important, and Ramon gave it to me. He did not take it from me. And unfortunately, we have a serious problem with folks that are handling the souls on these streets. They're not handing out the dignity, they're taking it. It's really hard to talk about stuff like this. I've been a community organizer for 10 years. So seeing the condition that we're in, it feels a little stagnant. So through this amazing work that Javier has been doing all summer long, I reached out to some of the kids in the community. We just started talking, and through this, a broadcasting project came through. Storytelling. We need to reach out to our souls that are on the streets, and we need to remind them that we're here, that I see them. We see you, and I'm very sorry that we've made you feel like you don't matter, because you matter. A lot of things that I've realized from the business folks is they talk about the human waste, and they talk about nuisances. But have folks ever considered putting a refrigerator outside with some apples, some burritos, a message of hope on your window. I see you. I'm so sorry. Come here on Thursday. The money that you're spending on security, spend it on burritos. Love people. Love people and they will love you back. Thank you so much for your time today. It's very important that we start reaching out to folks and we start seeing folks, not just from the top, all the way from the bottom. It matters who's dealing with our souls. Thank you for your time.
Okay, well, we hope that you really enjoyed that, the storytelling, really humanizing folks. You know, there's such a brutal conversation around homelessness sometimes in our city, and you see it when you watch the city council meetings. So we just thought it was important to bring some of the folk faces, the stories to the forefront and start the conversation there. Okay, thanks. Well, let's get into our round robin questions. So we're just gonna read these questions. We're gonna go one by one. These are either yes or no, or as you'll see in the first question, let me just get right into it. What grade would you give Albuquerque in this moment with regard to how the city is dealing with people who are unhoused? Let's start on that end with the, yes or me.
As far as that, I'm sorry.
A grade.
A grade like A through F? Oh, I would probably say, I think a C plus.
Yeah, so the C plus, right, is that first grade you get in class, we're like, oh, I really gotta start working hard here.
Answer the question. Come on, it's a round robin.
It is
It's a simple answer.
Answer the question. Come on, you can do it, Alex. You can do it.
I think after 8 years, we are at a C plus and you deserve to be at an A.
Okay, well, are we doing commentary? I mean, I'm just saying, like, let's just answer the
Maybe
question.
repeat the
I would say a
rules.
B plus, a B minus, B minus.
B minus.
I'm going to say C minus.
Thank you, and I'm so sorry, our intention was to mark these as they were being answered on the board. It's not possible to do with the slideshow, so we will produce a report actually for you all that we'll distribute via email with all the responses tracked. Okay, next question. Should Albuquerque continue expanding alternative responses such as ACS, the Albuquerque Community Safety Department, beyond police? Yes or no?
Doing it the right way. So I'll say yes.
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you all. Okay, number 3, should encampment sweeps continue as currently practiced?
No.
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 Thank you all. Would you prioritize permanent supportive housing over short-term shelters?
Yes.
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 Thank you all. Next question, do you agree that people who live outside need extra dispensation when there's extreme weather?
Yes.
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 Thank you all. Next question, in retrospect, was it appropriate to have the National Guard here?
Yes, but they were taken out of their mission.
I'm gonna say yes.
No.
No.
Thank you. Next question, do you support continuing the use of the National Guard for city public safety or homelessness response?
No.
No.
Yes.
Depends on how it's done.
Okay. Will you commit to fund and expand the engagement of peer support workers in this work?
Yes.
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 Wonderful. Will you commit to expanding youth programming in city community centers and creating youth employment opportunities?
Absolutely.
Yes.
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 Okay, how about a round of applause for our panel? Thank you all. Yeah, you did, and we got some good commitments on record here, so we need to follow through with those. Okay, wow, we are ending right on time today. I just want to thank all the candidates for joining today. We're going to do some closing statements in a moment, But before we do that, I just want to, actually, we're going to do the closing statements right now. They didn't have a chance to speak during those, so you'll have a minute apiece. We'll start that. I guess I'll do time. Okay, that's not my phone. Where's Maria? There you go. Can you do the timer again? Okay, sorry, 1 minute.
So where
1
we,
minute apiece. Okay. Tell me go. We'll start with, who has the mic? Okay.
I have it.
1 minute closing statements.
Thank you, Maria Elena. My name is Luis Sanchez. I'm a current city councilor. I'm a retired police officer, 26 years, and I'm also a business owner in Albuquerque. One of the things that I've always done as a business owner and as a police officer of the city of Albuquerque is I've always worked with a spirit of excellence, listening to my individual people that work with me, listening to the individuals who we deal with. Several stories throughout my career is helping people that have not been able to help themselves in a lot of ways. I've done that my whole entire career. Again, my career was in public safety. Maria Elena was exactly right. One of the things that we need to do is we need to work from the bottom up. My priority will be the individuals who I call superstar employees who have direct contact with the public. Right now, we don't have enough superstar employees contacting the public, whether it's a police officer wearing a badge and driving a police car, or whether it's someone in Parks and Recreation or anywhere else within the city. They need to be empowered to do their job and do their job correctly to help you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think I was just reflecting on the letter grades, and I would just say that if you asked me that question 8 years ago, it'd be an F, and I think everyone would agree it was an F. Yeah, we might be at a C+ now, but we know which direction to go, in part because of the wisdom that you've shared with us today. And I believe that these are really tough problems, and tough problems require real deep work to solve the problems. It's about how. We all want to help folks who are unhoused. It's about how to do it. And that's what I bring to the table. I bring experience that has gotten us from an F to a C+. And I know that's not great, but I'm telling you, it's that experience that you need to get from a C+ to an A. And that's what I bring to the table. I know I've already learned things that I will do on Monday, especially from Bryn. That is really important. But I also know there's things that we have to do as a community, that we've got to make sure this message gets to the county, gets to the state, and gets to all the stakeholders, because this is truly a one Albuquerque issue. And what you've done today is courageous for the mayor's office, and I hope you do it for the others.
My name is Alex Ubaez. I am your former United States Attorney, the Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer for all of New Mexico. I've lived my career here in public safety and public service, from being a crimes against children prosecutor at the DA's office to a cartel investigator for the feds before serving as your Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer. And what I saw there was a failure of systems, right? There are times when we need our justice system to work and focus and hold people accountable, like taking down the biggest fentanyl takedown in the history of the nation, like taking down 30 years of corruption in Albuquerque's police department. But there are other times when as a community, when as a government, it's our responsibility to come together and take care of people so they don't fall into those systems. And that's what's being asked of us here today. This is the pressing moral issue for our city, for us today, to how we take care of our neighbors who live on the streets, how we extend the basic human dignity that we all deserve to everyone. And we have solutions. It's housing, right? It's supportive housing. It is incorporating lived experiences into the decision-making at the top. It is cutting out the bureaucracy so we get people to the places they need to be and not make them jump through hoops to get there. This is about basic human dignity and taking care of our neighbors. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you again, Bren, and for everyone speaking today. It was important to hear these stories. I'm one of 6 kids. Growing up, both my parents worked, and in a lot of times as the oldest daughter, I was the one taking care of the family. So I understand hardship. I understand what it is to live paycheck to paycheck. And it's one of the reasons why all 6 of us have worked so hard to attain what we have attained in our lives. But with that also comes service and duty, because we know growing up, people helped us along the way. We were able to get where we are because neighbors helped us, because we did live off food stamps and we understood those things. So I am here as not just a Navy veteran and a small business owner, but as your neighbor. And as your public servant who is here to do the job, to get it done and manage it the way it needs to be managed so that the implementation happens. So we go from a C+ to an A. And it's not 8 years later, it's a year later. Thank you.
How about a round of applause for all of our candidates today?